Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Education Decision Making meeting. I'm Councillor Susie Horton and I'm the Cabinet Member for Education. Just before I go around the table and get people to introduce themselves, just a little bit of housekeeping, safety information. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room, and the public gallery, I don't think we can have anyone, by the stairwells, don't use the lifts, and assemble at the Queen Victoria statue in front of the civic offices. This is a live streamed meeting, and as there's no one giving deputations or members of the public, I don't have to go through that one, but can I just remind everyone to use the microphones provided when they are speaking. Probably best to start off by introducing ourselves, so I'll start over there.
Okay, Councillor Terry Norton, Conservative spokesperson.
Councillor Tom Coles, Labour spokesperson.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Anna Martin, Local Democracy Officer.
Caroline Corcoran, Head of Sufficiency, Participation and Resources in the Education Service.
Maria Smith, Group Accountant, Children's Services and Education.
Alison Edgerton, Group Accountant with responsibility for schools.
Julia Catherine, Head of Inclusion within Education.
Alison Jeffrey, Director, Children, Families and Education.
Mike Stone, Deputy Director, Education.
And okay, welcome everyone. Okay, are there any apologies for absence? I don't think there are. I think we're all here. Any declarations of interest? I will do my normal one, which is I am Governor at Craneswater Junior School.
I'm on the Academy Advisory Board at Penhale Infants.
My partner works at a secondary school in the city.
Always best to cover yourself on these things. Yeah. Okay, so we'll move straight on to item 3, which is the school modernisation programme. So I'll hand over to Caroline.
Hello. This is a regular quarterly report that we normally do, which outlines where we are with the school modernisation and sufficiency programme in terms of urgent school condition projects, mainstream school sufficiency schemes, and anything we're doing in relation to special needs provision in terms of accommodation within the city. As always, we recommend that the report is noted, and that includes the appendix, which gives you more individual information about each scheme. In terms of condition schemes, we already had some funding which was agreed at full council at the start of the financial year, and we have identified 5 significant projects that we need to undertake within the city. These are listed in 3.3, and 3 of the schemes relate to sort of masonry, stonework, etc., and 2 of the schemes relate to heating and boiler systems. These schemes are now underway. We're in liaison with the schools, and we are anticipating doing those works starting at Easter, because there's quite a significant amount of preparatory work that has to be done first, and so we're working on that stage at the moment. Any completed condition projects since the last time have been removed from the dashboard, and because it's been a little bit of a gap with the election since we last did a report, that a lot of projects have now been completed and removed from the dashboard. We've also agreed some minor contingency works since the last meeting in liaison with the lead member, which include hygiene facilities for disabled pupils at Craneswater Junior, and also disability access at Trafalgar School, and compliance works in relation to some electronic gates at Langstone Junior. In terms of secondary sufficiency, we've been progressing with schemes at Admiral Lord Nelson School, Charter Academy and Portsmouth Academy for some time now, and 2 of these 3 schemes are now on site, and the 3rd one will be on site in the autumn. So that work is all progressing. Our forecasts show that we will still have increasing need for more secondary school places, and therefore we're also undertaking some feasibility studies so that we can work out where the best place would be to make further expansions going forward, should we still need to do that when we've refreshed our forecasts. They are refreshed on an annual basis. In terms of primary sufficiency, forecasts were showing that there was a potential for some medium-term pressures on primary school places very much dependent on housing developments and the speed of housing developments in the city. As a result, we are undertaking some feasibility studies. We've already started there's one at Meon Infant, Meon Junior and Moorings Way, a sort of combined study there, and also we've done a combined study at Langstone Infant and Junior Schools. Those two are already underway, and there are three others mentioned in 5.2 which we are seeking to start in the autumn. Arundel Court has been granted some funding in line with our regular formula for furniture and fittings for the 2 additional classrooms that are going up in the new ESFA funded build. And there's also been some minor works at Beaconview Academy to allow them to continue to manage a bulge group, which has been there for a little while, but as it runs through the school and they have more children, we've needed to actually make some changes there. The main change this time round is in relation to special needs sufficiency. There's an increasing demand for SEND places across the city in all types of need, and therefore we've undertaken an SEND strategic accommodation review, which is outlined in 6.3. The review paperwork, review report rather, has just been finished, and we are anticipating that we will need to do some additional works to create more accommodation for SEND pupils. As an urgent interim matter, it's mentioned at 6.4 that we are doing temporary accommodation with a 3-year lifespan in Fratton. That's for pupils that would be going to the Mary Rose School, except there's not enough space, so therefore they're being accommodated in an annex site. In terms of the appendix itself, you can see that all schemes are green, apart from Admiral Lord Nelson, where there was a delay in the return of tenders, but that is now resolved. In terms of Redwood Park, where we had some issues with the original contractor, but we now have contingency arrangements fully in place in agreement with the school. And in relation to the Mary Rose pupils at Fratton, that's now being called the Lantern. That is going to be amber because it's an exceptionally fast-track project which is being delivered over days rather than weeks and months, and is very ambitious for us to do it in the timescale. So throughout the project there will be risks about whether it will be completed. I think we have something like 32 days to go and it's still on track. So we're about 6 or 7 weeks into a sort of 11-12 week build period where the contractor is working more than 12 hours a day, 7 days a week to get that ready for these young people for September. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Are there any questions?
Hello. Under 6.4, you mentioned that the Lantern has a 3-year lifespan. Would there be scope after that? Because I know Penhale had put in a bid to try and get the site next door. So would there be scope after that 3-year lifespan for that to maybe go ahead again?
In terms of, I know that, as you say, there was the Academy Trust that operates Penhale did put in a bid to have a school on the Harbour Fratton site. What was the Harbour Fratton site, which is now the Lantern site. There's no reason once those pupils have got some accommodation somewhere else that site can't be used for something different. We know that there have been all sorts of uses that have been mentioned for it in the past. It doesn't necessarily even have to be an educational use. But what we do need is we need some time frame between the urgent need that we have now and to be able to create some alternative accommodation within the city.
I also just wanted to go on record to commend the workers. I've seen them, I go down Penhale Road quite a lot, and they've just been pulling out all the stops to get that ready.
Yeah.
I just wanted to go on record saying that.
Thank you, yes, they absolutely have. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just a quick question on me on funding with that. So do we know how much of the funding for that has come from central government and how much we're putting forward for the Lantern project?
It's actually the next paper.
Okay, fine.
Paper in the
No problem.
thing. Yeah. It's got a breakdown there. Yeah. Any other comments? Anyone else want to add? No, thank you very much for that thorough report. So I note the progress on the school modernisation urgent condition projects, secondary school sufficiency projects and special school sufficiency projects. And yes, just agree with the things that endorse the last report. So it's formally approved. So thank you very much for that, Caroline. Okay, so now we are on item 4, which is the Special Provision Capital Fund, which is where this will be explained, hopefully, a bit clearer. So, who's delivering? Caroline's delivering this again. Over to you again.
Thank you. So, this report relates to the proposed use of government funding of £537,600. the government committed to providing capital funding to local authorities to create new school places and improve existing facilities for children with special educational needs. And we first had an allocation from them back in 2018-19, which was used for the creation of the lovely vocational centre at Vanguard. And then since then we've had a further allocation, and then after that there was a further allocation. So adding together the allocations which have so far not been allocated to anything specifically, we have a total of 537,600 in government funding, which is available for use on special needs accommodation facilities. In the report at 3.4 and 3.5, I've explained what we have to do to be able to access the funding. We have consulted and we've also looked at what would be the best use of it. Given that we have this increasing number of complex pupils in the city who have a range of needs but are unable to be accommodated within the Mary Rose provision, which would be the appropriate provision for them, there was a decision taken to work on creating the Lantern provision that we've just been talking about, and therefore this report asks to confirm that the £500,000 capital funding that was allocated in the recent round of capital allocations by the council back in February-March time, plus the DFE capital allocation are added together to create a total budget of 1.037 million, and then of that 1.02 million will be used for the refurbishment of the Lantern, and the remaining amount has been used for the SEND strategic accommodation review that I mentioned in my other report, which is to allow us to forecast what we need to do going forwards and to work out the most cost-effective and beneficial way to create accommodation for SEND pupils in the city. So the recommendations are that the use of the funding is agreed and that we should move forward with creating the master plan for SEND accommodation, and obviously there's been lead member approval for us already to start on the work at the Lantern.
Does that clarify where the money came from? Any other questions or comments, you guys?
No, not at this stage, no.
Okay. Anyone else want to make any comments? No, I just think the key point is, as well, we've got a lot of teaching experience here, is that we realise that demand is increasing, that we do realise that the special educational needs is something that's difficult to predict in a really sort of systematic way. But we've had the strategic review of the SEND last year. We've got the accommodation review going down on that. Actually, I think they take time to roll out, but I actually think we are in a really good position at Portsmouth. Just wanted to make that point.
So I will add something if I can, please, Susie. I mean, the only thing for me is just a concern over the cost in the years that it's going to be there. It seems like £1 million is a lot of money if it's only a 3-year project. And of course, money for special educational needs 100%. But I hope that we can gain some of that money back if that's sold in 3 years' time. I'm not sure whether the site will be worth that much, but I'd like to think that it's an investment as well as a funding going in the right place.
I appreciate what you said. I think it's really difficult to put a value on actually having those kids in the city and actually having that provision for them here. Yeah. I think it was it was the right decision. It was the right decision to make for the benefit.
Just come in. One thing I would say, not so much on capital, but if we didn't have provisions such as this at the Lantern, then we'd probably be looking at some out-of-city placements.
Yeah.
And they are, as you probably know, very expensive. So the impact on our DSG, the high needs block, would have been quite significant. Yeah. So, although yes, I'll take your point about capital and the fact we've had to sink a lot of funding at short notice into this particular project. Longer term, it would have had significant revenue implications if we hadn't done so. So, just to mention that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Okay, so just note the progress on that, and I think that's the main thing, isn't it, to say on that? It's for noting. Okay. Where are we now? The next item. So we're on to lots of budgets. Thank you, Caroline. Maintain schools balances report. Alison.
Hello, this is the annual report regarding the level of school balances for maintained schools as at the 31st of March 2019. The report sets out the balances as at the end of the financial year for 18-19 in section 4, and the second table within that section shows the increase of balances excluding those schools that converted to academy over the course of the year to be 1.3 million. The main reason for the increase in balances is due to 3 schools who had in-year deficits at the end of the financial year 17-18, and over 18-19 they recovered those balances. The underlying growth of the balances was just over 300,000. Of the total balance of 1.4 million, 176,000 actually relates to community balances such as after-school clubs, breakfast clubs, etc. This leaves 4.3 million of curriculum-related balances, of which 1.2 million is committed. This leaves a balance of 3.1 million of uncommitted balances, approximately 7.4% of total balances. The rest of the report sets out the results of the review of specific school balances, in particular those schools where we are seeing a reducing or low balance, or where schools are holding excessive balances. In both cases, we have contacted the schools concerned, and with regards to those schools that have reducing balances, we're working closely with the schools to provide support and advice to help them manage the budgets back to a more sustainable position. This also includes the use of make sure I get this right, a schools resource management advisor that the Department for Education are providing free of charge to the authority. They will be working with 2 schools in the city, and there's more detail set out in paragraph 5.9 and to 5.11. In addition, we've looked at those schools with excessive balances. The number of schools with excessive balances, and these are schools with balances over 20% of their budget, has reduced from 4 to 3 this year, and the report sets out the detail of the responses and the reasons why those balances are being held. Overall, we found that this year schools are concerned about the long-term financial viability and stability of their budgets, and they are holding where they've got high balances, they're holding them to try and mitigate any future issues. Those with the reducing balances, this year we saw them contacting us before we contacted them, which is a real positive. Yeah. And they are working very closely with us and being very proactive in trying to bring those budgets back to a more sustainable position. Section 6 sets out the information regarding capital balances. This year they have increased by 427,000. The majority of that increase related to some additional capital funding provided by central government in December 2018. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions?
No, just a comment from me, if that's okay. Yeah. Just to say that it's great that schools feel that they can come and be transparent about their funding there, and perhaps we could share that, so if any schools in the future feel the same around their budgets, that it's okay to come to us and to be transparent about that. I think again it's just commending them for being upfront and transparent.
Thank you. We'll pass that on to the schools, and we say we always try to be open and work with them.
And I think I've been around long enough now to remember that it was a transfer from a clawback mechanism to this whole thing about scrutiny around the budgets, and it seems to be working really well. So, yeah, I agree with you. Question I would have, which I would be looking at, is the recommended balances of 2 to 3%, and us having a higher. It's worth mentioning that, I think. I don't know whether anyone wants to say anything about that. It's 7.4.
Yes, 7.4. It does say that this SIP for guidance says that we should have a balance overall of about 2 to 3% of the overall budgets for schools. The 7.4 balance is quite high. However, when you look across the schools, it is a bit of a swing. There's some with the very high balances that are tipping it towards that end of the scale.
Yeah.
So there are others that are obviously that bit lower, and a lot of the schools, the vast majority, are kind of in the middle. Where we'd expect them to be.
And that, I guess, is where the robust conversations come in around, those balances, either low or high.
Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. If there's no other questions or comments, just note the level of maintained schools revenue balances. And then we'll move on to the next item, which is that you again. It's you again, future school funding arrangements 2020 to 2021.
Thank you. The attached report actually provides an update on the developments in respect of the school funding arrangements for 2021. We are currently awaiting operational guidance from the Department for Education, and at a recent meeting in June they indicated that the guidance is unlikely to be available until the autumn term this year, and that's mostly due to the political uncertainty. They are saying that we should plan at the moment for a no change 2020-21, and therefore we started our initial consultation with schools to seek their views on a number of items, and this will help to inform the work that we do over the summer break. So we are looking to move schools at the moment. We sought their views to move schools, We sought schools' view to move primary schools to the national funding formula from April 2020, and that's set out in Table B within the consultation, and it is in line with the direction of travel that we have been working with primary schools over the last couple of years. We are looking to maintain the minimum funding levels that are set by the Department for Education, and this is a minimum funding level per pupil, and they're set for different rates for primary and secondary sectors, and they're set out in Table C of the report. We're also looking to maintain a neutral minimum funding guarantee of 0%, which would mean that schools would get the same funding per pupil as they're currently getting in 1920. And we are seeking views on a potential transfer of 0.5% from the schools block to the high needs block. The results of the consultation are set out in Appendix B, but I have noticed that although the Appendix B is there, the figures seem to be missing. So I will ensure that a up-to-date Appendix B is sent out and passed on to people. However, overall the results were supportive of the proposals. And we have had a number of comments in addition to the comments we requested, where schools have given us further areas to consider over the summer. And as I said, as the DfE hasn't issued any guidance for 2021, we're not making any firm proposals at this stage, but paragraph 6.15 sets out how we are going to progress over the work that we do over the summer. In which that we are going to look to move the primary formula factors either to the NFF rates or towards the NFF rates, so we're getting them closer to them. We are going to try and limit the adjustments that we make to the minimum funding guarantee to try and maximise the funding that we get out to schools, and that we're going to do a further consultation in the autumn, and this is going to look at the options of potentially transferring 0.5% of the schools block to the high needs block, and also some further options regarding the growth fund for 2021. The report also provides a brief update on the work undertaken with the high needs budget and also within the early years block, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Alison. Any questions on that? You've probably been through it 3 times now, I think, Schools Forum, and you get the hang of it after a while. No, I think it's really clear. I think we'll just wait and see what the final announcement are. Let's hope the government doesn't give us any surprises, and that it stays as we think it will. So just say I note the progress made to the local funding formula and the consultation, and you'll send round that what is the sheet that is blank at the moment to update us. Note the outcome of the consultation and the review of the high needs funding methodologies, which are the 0.5%, and that will come later in the year. So thank you very much, Alison, I really appreciate that. Okay, next item, more money. DSG outturn report and revised budget. Is that you again?
It's me again, sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, so this is an annual report that updates the Cabinet member on the 18-19 year-end position regarding the Dedicated Schools Grant, known as the DSG, and asks for revisions to the 19-20 DSG. So just to talk you through the outturn position for last financial year, the table in section 4 provides the outturn position of the 18-19 financial year, And as you can see, there was a net underspend of just over £1 million. This consists of two things. There was a net increase in income from the Department for Education due to the unexpected additional high needs funding that the Council received in December 2018, plus an underspend of £627,000 in the expenditure budgets. The total underspend has been combined with the remaining balance brought forward from 17-18 and carried forward into 19-20 financial year, which has provided a balance of 3.2 million. The reasons for the underspend are detailed in the report, but I'd just like to draw your attention to the following. The majority of the underspend related to early years, that was 305,000, of which a large amount related to the contingency fund that we held for 3 and 4-year-olds. The work that we did in setting the budget for 1920 reduced the amount of contingency that we hold centrally now and passed out more funding to early years settings by increasing their hourly rate. So we don't expect to see that in future years. The high needs budgets, for once we had the Element 3 top-up funding almost broke even, and there's more information in the report regarding that. Our out-of-city placements provided an underspend, and that was mostly due to actually a lower than average cost rather than a reduction in pupil numbers. The pupil numbers were as we were expecting. And we also have a permanent exclusion credit which was received. This is a one-off and can't be guaranteed every year that we'll get the same amount, and that also supported the underspend in that particular area. And I'm happy to take any questions on the outturn position before I go on to the revised budget.
Any questions so far? No?
Okay, I shall go into the revised budget then. The revised budget reflects any policy decisions or structural changes that have been agreed since setting the DSG back in January 2019. It includes the full year impact of any academy conversions that happened in 2018-19 and early in 1920. It also reflects the carry forward that was agreed on the school specific contingency that we said that we would use in this financial year, and it reflects the impact of reversing the decisions that we made to implement changes and savings within the high needs block following the receipt of the additional funding late in December 2018. In addition, it includes the restructuring of the city's special schools, in particular the closure of Willow Centres for Children and the expansion of Cliffdale Primary Academy, the additional special school places for pupils starting in September 2019, and the set-up of an early years complex needs inclusion fund from September 2019. Overall, this has increased the pressure on the DSG to 328,800 for 1920, and this is being managed by the use of the carry forward from 18-19. However, this will not be sustainable in the long term, and further work will be required with the Education Department to ensure future sustainability. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions? No. Thank you very much indeed. So I note the year-end outturn budget, the DSG, and approve the revised budget. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alison. Okay, different type of money. So we're over to Maria now.
So this is the Education Portfolio Outturn Report for the financial year 2018-19. The report is for noting and sets out the financial position for the education portfolio at the end of the financial year 18-19. The table at paragraph 4.2 sets out the financial position on the revenue account, which was an in-year overspend of £120,000. The detail is set out in paragraphs 4.3 to 4.7, but there are a couple of things to highlight. The main area of overspend was the homeschool transport budget, which overspent by £274,000. This was partially offset by an underspend on staffing, increased income and other small variances across the service. The overall education overspend of £120,000 was managed by using the portfolio reserve that was carried forward from the previous year. Following the use of this reserve to fund the 18-19 overspend and also taking off any grant funding commitments, the portfolio is left with £104,000 available in reserves to fund any future service pressures. The service will continue to face a financial challenge this year, especially with regard to homeschool transport, with forecast spending levels likely to be in excess of the available balance within the portfolio reserve. The report also includes the capital programme outturn position. A summary of the capital programme is set out in Appendix 1, where some notes have been entered against particular schemes. However, the overall capital position at the end of March 2019 shows a small overspend against the approved budget of £7,600, which will be managed within the overall budget moving forwards. And I think that's everything, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Maria. Any questions or comments?
Just comment from me, and it's just one about an underspend on staffing. I think, at a time when teachers are often teaching additional subjects and feel overstretched, I'd hope that any underspend on staffing was as minimal as possible.
Does anyone want to comment on that?
Just like to say, this is within the cash limit budget, but not the school's budget, and it was just a result of a couple of vacancies that we had within the education service last year.
It's just
Apologies, okay.
No problem.
Thank you.
That's fine. You said it. And also just to say that the most important part of this is obviously the homeschool transport budget has been a pressure point for a number of years. We are taking that seriously. We've got a paper going to Cabinet in the future. It's happening all over the country. It's not special to Portsmouth, but if we need to come up with some solutions, otherwise this is just going to be an ongoing pressure, which we have to deal with. But it is something that is in the pipeline. Any other comment? Do you guys have?
Yeah, I think just to reinforce that, because it's probably worth just making that point today, that we had that significant pressure from homeschool transport. We were able to mitigate that because we had some underspends in other areas and a portfolio surplus. That is getting more and more challenging. Homeschool transport, the pressure is building, and as Councillor Horner said, we are taking a paper to Cabinet shortly, so we'll inform you about that. We have got a visit tomorrow to Milton Keynes to find out what they did, which brought some of their costs down, but although I understand their costs are slightly above ours, so we'll see what we learn from that. And we're looking at other ways of trying to reduce costs, but it is an ongoing pressure, and it's the most significant pressure within the education service budget.
Thank you. Any other comments or anything? No. So thank you, Maria, for that. Just to say that I note the report. That's what I have to do. It's for noting. Next is where are we now? The update on the early years SEND. So we're over to Julia.
Yes, this is to update on the way that we provide outreach support, both for preschool aged children with SEND and also school aged children with SEND, and the changes that are underway with the provision of outreach. So outreach is outreach to mainstream providers to enable them to meet those special educational needs. So in terms of early years, first of all, as has been mentioned in the previous report, we've got the change to our specialist nursery provision, which from September will be delivered by Cliffdale Primary Academy. Previously it was by the Willows Nursery School. And we also had previously an early years inclusion fund for children who were in mainstream settings. Increasingly what we're finding is that families are choosing for their child with special needs to be in a mainstream nursery setting, but they still need additional support, particularly where they are eligible for the 2-year offer. So we have used some of that, the change in the funding that's required for the specialist nursery, to create a complex needs fund for early years, so that where you've got children with special needs, their parents are choosing for them to be in mainstream settings, we can provide the setting with a level of support to ensure that their needs are met. We'll still have the existing inclusion fund, which the guidance states should be for low and emerging needs, so that will still be available, and we'll still have the specialist nursery provision for those whose needs can't be met in mainstream. The reason, or one of the reasons for that change, is that currently there's a number of different providers providing outreach support to mainstream. So we also want to use some of the funding to create one outreach post, which when appointed to, would work with the area inclusion coordinators to make sure that, again, nursery settings can have one place to go to access support, and that person would work alongside the existing providers such as Portage to ensure that we're skilling up nursery staff. In terms of the school age offer, again, similarly, we're looking at launching a better coordinated offer from September. So this is using existing funding alongside the fact that the current contract comes to an end at the end of August, to launch a new coordinated offer with the coordinator sitting within the inclusion service. So that would include a broader range of support for mainstream schools to support them and build capacity in meeting the needs of children with SEND. So it includes input from specialists who currently work in special schools, but also a telephone advice line and support from mainstream experienced SENCO colleagues as well. So the proposal is, with the agreement of the Cabinet member, that this new arrangement would be in place from September, and that we would look to recruit to that post for as soon as possible after the start of term as well. And obviously that support, the new support, would work alongside existing support, as I say, such as Portage and Portage Plus.
Thank you, Julia. Any comments or questions? No, I think it's been well versed, over the last year, and it's really good to see it happening. And as you say, it's not to take away from any of the good work that all those different support services have been providing, but actually to pull it together. So I think that's really, really, really promising. Okay, so that was for noting, and then last but not least,
yes. So lastly, this is about targeted short breaks. The recommendation is that the Cabinet Member for Education notes the increase in the uptake of targeted short breaks, and the pressure that will be exerting on the budget this year, and agrees to consultation taking place in the autumn term to look at how we allocate targeted short breaks in the future. So targeted short breaks, that's about providing respite support for carers of children with disabilities to ensure that they get a short break. We are required to ensure that short breaks are available under the 4 categories set out in 3.2, and the targeted offer concerns the A and B within that list. So that's educational and recreational activities and the provision of daytime care for children with disabilities. So it's important to say there is also a specialist offer of short breaks, which is overnight care and emergency care delivered by a beachside short break provider. That's not what we're talking about within this paper. So that's the specialist offer, which is dealt with separately. This is just looking at the targeted offer. So we refer to targeted in 2 categories. We've got targeted 1, where we commission open access recreational activities. We have 1 contract that delivers a number of those recreational activities. And then targeted 2 includes our specialist holiday play scheme, and also prepaid cards where families have choice and control about how they want to use a specified allocation of funding. Section 3.5 sets out the current budgets for both the targeted 1 offer and the targeted 2 offer. So targeted 1 is 77,000 per year, and that contract is due to end in March 2021. The targeted 2 Specialist holiday place scheme has a value of 147,000 per year, and there's an additional contribution from children's social care of 24,000 within that. And then the targeted 2 offer also includes prepaid cards. So this is open to children who have got an education, health and care plan at a high level of support. The families are entitled to a personal budget, and the way that we deliver that in Portsmouth is via a card that has an allocated amount of funding attached to it, and then families can choose how to best spend that funding to make the most difference for their family. Currently the allocation is £300 a year for families who are eligible, and you'll see in section 3.7 that of the 696 families who are currently eligible, the 495 families currently opt to take up the offer of a prepaid card. So we don't have 100% uptake, but the uptake is growing and has been growing. We've done a lot of work recently to ensure that families are aware of the offer, and we've seen the uptake increase as a result of that. We did a review in December last year about the whole of the short break offer, and there were some recommendations from that review that we look to ensure that the services available are allocated fairly and targeted at those that most need them. One of the things, for example, that was noted is that some families access more than one short break. For example, in 3.9, it highlights some of the overlap between both the specialist offer and the targeted offer and different elements of the targeted offer. For example, 91 children accessing the holiday place scheme, 71 of those also access a prepaid cards. So there's some families who obviously aren't eligible or aren't able to take advantage of this, and some families that are able to access more than one area. So the proposal is that we consult in the autumn on the best way of allocating the available funding to make the most difference for families. Section 5 sets out some of the possible options that could be considered. For example, we could limit the eligibility for prepaid cards. We could remove the option of prepaid cards and just commission certain services that families could access should they choose to. We could reduce the value of prepaid cards. We could offer prepaid cards only to families not accessing specialist short breaks. We could set the allocation annually based on the budget available, and we're also interested in working with families to look at whether there's other options that we haven't considered that they feel that would make a difference. I'd just like to highlight in section 5.7, there's a slight change to the wording, I think, in the version that's been circulated. So 5.7 should read, in addition to the above options for consideration, the specialist holiday place scheme is due for retender in April 2020, and the targeted 1 offer is due for retender in 2021. It is therefore proposed that the consultation also seeks views on potential changes to the whole of the targeted offer. So actually looking at whether there's different ways in which we could allocate that support. So the proposal is that we go out to consultation in September for implementing any changes from April 2020.
Thank you, Julia. Are there any questions? We've got a question?
So 2 from me, and it's on the prepaid cards to start with. So in terms of the prepaid cards, how do we monitor what is being spent on those cards? Am I right in thinking that we ask for receipts back? Is that a sample, or is that possible?
Yes, so we ask for receipts of what's spent. We can, with prepaid cards, you can switch on and off certain categories. So we keep it as wide as possible, and we monitor what the spend is through the receipts. It does mean that if the money was being spent inappropriately, you could switch off the card. So we've got monthly control over how those work.
And in terms of the balances at the end, do we check if there's any balance left on those cards that we take back, or is it just it's given as a card with that amount?
No,
on it
it's
spent?
allocated
Yep.
for the year. So
Okay.
for those that take up that offer, that amount is allocated for the year.
The reason I ask, I mean, I really struggle with this because I think it's a great thing, and I think lots of families will really need it. I also know that there are many families out there who will save every single penny in case of an emergency and what have you, and so they don't take advantage of holidays and times and treats and things like that. So I think it's increasingly important that we have opportunities for these families to be able to go out and to use those kind of facilities and not potentially spend what they might see as their own money that might be putting aside across the board there. However, I think it's also it's important to know that that money is going in the right place. Hence the question about questioning what the money is spent on. So 495 of 6. How many eligible was it?
696. And obviously that number is increasing with the increase in the number of children with the education, health and care plans. So that's the pressure on this budget is increasing each year.
Okay.
Just to add to that, there is a pressure this year on this budget. So, and this wouldn't come into effect until the following year. So we are having to deal with the pressure this year,
already this year.
as well as plan for obviously another pressure the following year.
I think my concern is that I think I feel uneasy spending £1 million on a site for 14 students who rightfully so need it, and then taking £300 away from families or within that category. Okay, thanks.
I think what we'd hope to get through the consultation is to put forward a number of options and get families to tell us what will make the biggest difference for them. So one option would be to take away the prepaid cards, but that would be about then commissioning more support for families instead, or families might tell us that actually they want that choice and control themselves about what makes the biggest difference. So I think it's really about making sure we're listening to those people that are currently benefiting from this to see actually what makes the biggest difference.
Do you want to say something?
I was just going to say about the proposal about the family card. I thought that was a good thing in there as well. I've got one myself. So.
Yeah. So that
they work out really well.
Yeah. So obviously none of us are enjoying looking at making these difficult decisions, and that was one of the things that we came up with, was this notion of actually what else is out there which is cheaper that can actually go towards this. But I think the reason I feel the best decision is to make these decisions after the consultation is I'm not in that situation, so I wouldn't even know how this impacts on different people. And I think Julia's right. If you're talking to the people who've got it at the moment, they're in a better position to say what would be the way they would choose to change things if we had to make these decisions. Okay. So I note everything. I've been over those figures enough times, and definitely agree for the consultation to happen. And the report. When will that be? Does it say? Will we go out?
So we're looking at implementing changes by April. Certainly for prepaid cards, we start that process in April. The consultation would be across the autumn term, and then certainly by January we would have the outcome.
All right, thank you, Julia. Okay. So I think that brings us to the end of our agenda. So thank you very much, everyone, for all your reports, and for those of you going on holiday, have a lovely holiday, and we'll see you very soon, I'm sure. Thank you.